Today on the Leadership Vision podcast, we are talking about how to create opportunities for a team to not only feel a greater sense of belonging and meaning, where the presence of difference and diversity is actually an invitation for greater clarity and creativity among team members. An environment where a team begins to expand their intellectual or cognitive aperture of creativity to be more creative in how they're choosing to collaborate and how they're choosing to problem solve together. Where we can trust the process, where the issues or concerns will emerge themselves. Trust that we have some adults in the room that can actually have a conversation on what we're going to do with this.
You are listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, sharing our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths, the strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Nathan. How are you?
I am great.
You look showered and shaved and ready to go.
I am showered and shaved and ready to go. You know, it's funny. We are both, however many thousand miles apart, dealing with water issues in our home. And I feel more connected to you than I...
It's pouring outside. Yeah, it's January, whatever it is.
Here too, we had issues in our roof ceiling, ants, mold, all kinds of stuff. It's getting dealt with. You too have something similar.
Something's wet.
Something's wet. It's just weird. Do you find that when you kind of have I was going to say unexpected adversity, but I guess all adversity is unexpected, or something that's like a weird roadblock, or like you're going along your day and all of a sudden, oh, the ceiling caved in. Like, I always find myself going to this next level of like creativity and problem solving and like, okay, well, we'll shift this and we'll move this here and I got to call this guy and do this and that other thing. But what do you do in those moments of like challenge in that way?
I'll tell you, Nathan, if something goes wrong in our house, my first response is we're moving. That is my first response. It is time to move.
Okay.
If we're going to clean this part of the house, I might as well keep cleaning and just move. Okay. And that to me is the first indication. So that reaction is an emotional reaction, I know, but I do not go into problem solving mode. I go into sell the house removing mode.
Like, we're getting out of here.
Yep.
Interesting.
Enough of this.
I know, and we don't need to get into it here, but you've had enough of these issues, be it house-related or others, that you solve them. You haven't moved. Yeah. You make it through them. You love where you live. And so this is a little bit of a transition here, because our regularly scheduled podcast we're going to save that, because you were on this call with a group of these international leaders, and as we're kicking off 2023 here and talking about our renewed focus on teams and how teams thrive, there's an element of this story and what you're about to share that I think is applicable. And it's kind of this idea of like when you challenge people, when you have a challenge, that people become more creative in how to solve it. And through that, there's this sense of self-awareness. You kind of see what you're made of in these moments of like difficulty and challenge, and you see what other people maybe in your home or whatever are made of. So I wonder if you can kind of set up this call you were on the other day.
Here's the background. Serve the City International is an agency that focuses on aligning volunteer groups with needs in large cities, small cities, within countries around the world. So Serve the City International is meeting humanitarian needs through volunteer service. And so I've been involved with Serve the City for a long time. I've done several service projects throughout Europe, and the director, Carlton, is someone that I've known for about 20 years. And so Carlton and I go way back. I'm a subscriber to their newsletter, so in December or whatever, I got this invitation to join the January Visioncast for Serve the City International on January whatever at 11 o'clock. So I thought, Mondays are staff days, and so I thought, I'm not going to be able to be on this call. Put it on my calendar, tried to protect it. I did, and was on the call. Now, Nathan, you're a part of staff meeting Mondays, so you know like how busy it is. Sometimes when I show up to the meeting with you, and I'm kind of distracted. So this is what I was looking. So in the midst of my staff meeting Mondays, I'm looking forward to this call because I protected it. It's an hour-long call, and I thought this is going to be a meeting where I'm going to be able to just put on something warm, sit in my chair, drink hot coffee, and eat pistachios. I mean, that was really my dream of, I never get a chance to be on mute while I'm on camera, eat pistachios, and drink hot coffee. So that was like the dream.
A passive activity. It's like listening to a podcast.
Just listen to Carlton and this international team. Sure. So I get on the call, and it's a Zoom call. People are popping up, as you can imagine. And one of the things that I know I need is I need international context. I need to be connected to things that are happening internationally. It's just how I'm wired. So one of the reasons why I signed up for this is to get a chance to hear people from around the world talk about the concerns and needs that they're meeting within their city. So as people are popping up, I'm seeing different nationalities. I'm seeing people in European apartments. I'm seeing people sitting on terraces in Africa, different environments, different backgrounds. And so that's already meeting my needs. And Carlton says hi. I say hi back. He introduces me to a couple people. And then I go back on mute, back to my coffee and back to my pistachios. Content to be in this meeting. So Carlton starts the meeting, and he has one of the people that works for him. They kick it off. The meeting happens to be on what is called Blue Monday in Europe, which is somehow it's the most depressed day of the winter for them, or the most depressed day of the year. People, whatever it is. So that's kind of like the backdrop of Blue Monday. That's kind of interesting to me. Anyways, so I'm sitting back in my chair, like I said, and Carlton is explaining what's going on, and I'm getting a chance to hear leaders from all over Europe, all the different countries in Africa, the Caribbean, South America, just kind of contribute to what is that's going on in their country around these service projects. At some point, Carlton turns to his assistant and says, Sarah, let's just open up the floor and let people just share what some of their concerns and what their thoughts are. And I thought, this should be interesting. I kick back even further on my chair, Nathan. It's kind of like, this is going to be really fun to hear. Some guy, who I can't remember where he was from, he talks. Interesting. Then there was, he stopped talking. Then there was like that awkward Zoom pause. And then Carlton kind of looks in the camera and he says, Brian Schubring, I'd love to hear something from you.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I have pistachios in my teeth. And I'm thinking, why? What am I going to say? Because I'm not prepared for this.
Right.
So I come off mute and, kind of straighten up and, adjust my coat or whatever and start talking. And what I did was I started by saying, I'm just grateful for the chance to be here. Kind of gave some background of why I'm there and some background of who I am. Then Carlton asked a little more about, what were some of the things I'm thinking about, what I'm interested in. And what I started by saying, Nathan, is one of the reasons why I'm involved with and supportive of Serve the City is because it gives people a chance to meet real-time needs in real time. So what is unique about the organization is you can bring a bunch of like-minded volunteers together or people that have never met each other and bring them together to meet a current need in a city that would otherwise go unmet if it weren't for these volunteers to come together. And what it usually does for me is it gives me a chance to be connected to people from all different countries to meet a need within a specific country. So for example, as you can imagine, there are many cities in Europe that are specifically focused in the Ukraine or with the needs of Ukrainian refugees. Much of the work is with refugees throughout Europe. And so I started talking about that. And so I was also saying that one of the reasons why I value the opportunity is because these volunteer opportunities tend to meet some fundamental psychological needs of us as human beings. And those needs are this need for meaning, belonging, and significance. So each one of us, if you think about it, we have a need for meaning, belonging, and significance. And oftentimes those needs can be deepened when a group gathers together to focus on some specific need. It's like all of a sudden we're here together. So there's a sense of belonging. We're serving. There's a sense of meaning. And since there's typically a need that's beyond maybe our intellectual or emotional comprehension, we have a sense of significance in doing something together. And that's one of the reasons why I like it. But then I also said this. I said, and one of the things that I do know is that in this 3 years working or living with COVID, that people's need for meaning, belonging, and significance is heightened even more because many people have gone so long without significant events where their needs for meaning and belonging are met. So now when people are showing up for a volunteer experience or when they're showing up to the workplace, they have a greater expectation that these experiences are going to have more meaning or a greater sense of connection and belonging than they have before because their pent-up need for this connection is even higher than it was 6 months ago or 3 years ago. And so what I was saying, or what I was encouraging the people with is, now more than ever, the need to have these opportunities available to people is so great because people need to have a sense of contribution to doing something good for humanity when so much has been happening to us as human beings that is out of our control. This is finally a time when we're able to have some control over our contribution to increase the sense of understanding that we have a place where we can belong, where we can serve and engage in something meaningful, and the impact of our work can have a significant impact far beyond what we could ever imagine.
That's really cool. I think that you're totally right. I think I wrote down people's need for meaning, belonging, and significance has been just, I don't want to say decimated, but it's been rough the last few years. And I think, the other piece of that is now people are craving that so much, and they're also maybe a little weary or unsure of how or where to get that. What I'm also hearing in this is just this tremendous need for teams to create meaning and belonging and purpose in the workplace, but maybe through doing events like this outside of the workplace. I'm sure you talked about that in some way about just this idea of like how do teams come together and serve to do something that's completely outside the office to just kind of get out of their comfort zones to find connection. Did that part of it come up?
Yeah, that's also one of the things that I addressed in my voluntolding, my being volunteered to share. One of the things that I said was one of the things that I value about Serve the City is that it takes place in diverse settings where people are being asked to meet a need or a social concern that has several cultural or diverse obstacles to overcome to actually serve the need. And so one of the things I noted is that because the diverse need is elevated, that causes an individual to have to think more creatively on how to navigate the cultural and social and relational diversity represented there that they wouldn't normally be involved in. Now, Nathan, have you ever noticed, like when you travel, maybe like a different culture, a different state, or different country, have you ever noticed that you tend to be more creative when you're in those situations?
Oh, yeah. Like I think whenever I'm outside of my kind of normal routine, I feel like I have a more inspired sense of whatever and just kind of like even see things and notice things that I wouldn't at home.
Yep. And same thing for me. Like, it could be just a changing of my environment to an international context. And Nathan, you've obviously been the recipient of some of my explosive creativity coming back from a trip. But
explosive,
what's happening, I know, isn't it though? What's happening in the brain is when we are in situations where we are facing greater degrees of diversity than what we face normally, there tends to be, like for a metaphor, the opening of an aperture in the brain where our creativity increases because we have greater opportunities for creativity when diversity increases. So when you have a team together that is diverse in and of itself, diversity is increasing. So the need to work together, we're more creative. When you have a very diverse need that is also being asked to be met, not only is the significance of meeting that need increase, but our creativity is also increasing because we have to be opening up the aperture of our imagination even more because there are diverse needs to be overcome to meet the need of the human being on the recipient side. So when it came to Serve the City, like part of my main message was not only are we meeting the psychological needs of people to have a sense of meaning, belonging, and significance, but we're also meeting like this neurological need of creativity by having diversity to be overcome in order for the needs to be met. And so when I began talking about this with this group, Carlton kind of interrupted me and said, so you mean that not only is this service project meaningful for the recipient, but it's also more meaningful for the participant in this who's doing the serving? And I said, yes, you're getting an exponential return on your investment, because not only are the people with the need being served, but the people that are doing the serving are also having to overcome many diverse elements to meet the needs of another person, and that's creating a greater sense of belonging and significance. So when I began thinking about this, after I was done talking, I thought there's just so much here to wring out when we as leaders begin to think about, how is it that we truly invest in our people? Even today, we had 2 conversations with 2 executive directors in 2 different organizations. It's been a busy day. And both of these individuals were speaking of the need to invest in their people because they're both struggling with the return to work paradigm, or the return to work reality. And imagine this counterintuitive approach for a minute if you think, let's try something different. People are returning to work in different capacities. I, as a team leader, have the chance to invest in our people. There's one way to do it where we introduce something that's comfortable, something that's known, a development opportunity that's familiar. That's one way of doing it. But like this example with Serve the City, what if we thought about creating opportunities for team growth or team connection by adding layers of diversity or layers of challenge that will intentionally challenge the mindset of people on how it is that they can create. So it's the same amount of time that's being spent for the development, but the return on that investment is even greater because people are having to actually work through some issues of diversity that are existent on their teams that they may not have understood before they got to this development opportunity.
I like that. I mean, when you think about growth and development and any other, use a thesaurus, whatever other word you want to use for that, all of that takes place with some activity, some motion, some movement, some pain, some challenge. And so as leaders are trying to help their teams grow and develop and accomplish something, like there needs to be some kind of agitation.
Yep.
I like what you said about the diverse experience, and how, going back to what you mentioned about when you're traveling, how sometimes even just plopping people in situations that they're not used to can bring about some level of change or produce some kind of aha moment in those individuals that then the team can use to work better together towards whatever their goals are. We haven't talked about this for a long time, but this reminds me of Vision Trek from back in the day. Those of you who don't know, Vision Trek was our experiential activity where we would take people, service project type things, and just put them in unfamiliar settings and then facilitate a discussion around what was this like for you? Man, I kind of miss those now that I'm thinking about that.
Now that you're reminiscing on it, right?
Now that I'm thinking about that. So I think this sounds like such a cool opportunity and a challenge for leaders to get people into these, ideally like international settings, or we have quite a few international listeners, so whatever that is. But Brian, talk a little bit to maybe the leader who's like, that sounds great, but I can't do that. I can't take my leaders out and do something like this, in our city, let alone, an international thing. So what might be the more, I don't want to say practical, but like just like a down to kind of bare bones idea or thing that would kind of get this idea across? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because one of the things that I think is relevant is if a team leader chooses to do an exercise like this, I think the first thing to ask is, what is the objective of your meeting? Like, what is it that you are trying to solve? What is the challenge, or what's the invitation that you're going to ask the team to actually work on? So have that in your mind Because akin to Serve the City goes to a location, they have a concern or a need that they're going to meet. So that's out there. So number one for the team leader, what is it that you really want to invite the team to discuss? So we're not going to, just have a conversation here. We're going to actually ask the team to work on something once our first conversation is over. So that's what you have in mind. What is it that you really want to accomplish? Now, to engage this psychological need for meaning, belonging, and significance, and to take advantage of this neurological reality of, creativity comes in the midst of greater diversity. There is a diversity that is seen and a diversity that is unseen. And so the opportunity that I see here is to maybe ask a series of questions of your team members to discuss maybe in pairs of like one or two people and then as a group. And questions could be around this unearthing or this unveiling of the diversity that already exists within your team and among your team members. So for example, one element of diversity is where are you from? And that question of where are you from, that could be what culture are you from? What country are you from? But perhaps in our context for today, it could be, are you from a small town? Are you from a suburb? Did you grow up in an agricultural community? Did you grow up in an urban community? Because that's going to shape your mindset. That's going to reveal a layer of diversity is a mindset from which we were raised that came from the context that we're currently in. Another area of diversity is to ask people about their educational experience. I can't even begin to discuss how many times the issue of education reveals a sense of diversity where a person may not have had the best education availed to them. Some may have had the opportunity to go to a private school. Some may have gone to a very large public school, very small, and anything in between, parents that were highly educated or parents that weren't. There's a diversity that is there as well. Another layer of diversity could be any kind of question that ignites a conversation around belief system, whether it's a social belief, a religious belief, personal beliefs and values will also uncover another layer of diversity. You can talk about social interests, volunteer interests, but Nathan, does that make sense about just kind of talking about those different layers is going to reveal levels of diversity that each person shares. Now, imagine if you have a team of 10 people and you choose to ask 2 or 3 of these questions. Imagine how many answers are going to emerge just from that simple conversation. And each answer represents a layer of diversity that the team will then need to maybe work through or simply be aware of as they're having conversations or working together to solve the problem that you came to the meeting with.
Yeah, so when we're talking about people's need for meaning, belonging, and significance, there's on one end of the spectrum, there's getting everybody out, taking an international trip, do this like Serve the City type project, really put them in a space that is way outside their comfort zone, that's diverse in so many ways, and see what emerges. On the other side, something you can do in your next staff meeting is ask one of these simple but profound questions that you mentioned that just starts getting people's minds thinking about how my experience is different from your experience, and what are the similarities and differences, and how do we grow and learn from that.
Correct.
And it's just that simple. And so the leaders that are out there, they're like, I don't know what to do. It's like, boom, here's some quick things to do.
Here's a message to the leaders.
All right.
One of the invitations I would have for you, if you are the team leader, is please, coming from some learned experience of my own, you don't have to overthink this.
Right.
My invitation is pick a couple of questions with the intention to just increase our team awareness of the diversity that's already around the table, that's already in the room. Second, truly give people a chance to pair up with one person or 2 at the most to discuss the topic at hand for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, just as that small group. Let the people do the work, because as a leader, you don't have to have the answer to this one. After those small conversations, then open it up to the larger team to have people from each of those smaller groups talk about what they shared with each other. What were the elements of diversity that emerged? How did people answer the questions? What was it like to actually answer the questions. What were you feeling when other people were giving those answers? And then collectively say, or just ask of the group, which of these areas of diversity or simply area of difference is something that's going to help us as a team, because we can rally around it, something that we hold in common. And also, I encourage you to maybe ask this question: is which of these issues or areas of diversity or areas of difference can get in the way of this team in how they work together? And leader, please don't answer the question. Let people do the work for themselves to discuss for themselves what it is that they think. Oftentimes when we work with a team, one of the things that we'll end with is asking the team to discuss what were some of the issues or some of the differences or similarities that surfaced, have them name those, and then ask them, why is that issue or difference or concern important for today's conversation? And so, as you can see here, many people know what the elements of difference and diversity actually are. They oftentimes go unsaid. When we give teams the chance to name the issues or the areas of difference and diversity, it puts that difference in the center. It makes it common because we said it out loud. And then there's an invitation for us to now ask, now what are we going to do? And that provides a collective sense of trust emergence where we can trust the process, where the issues or concerns will emerge themselves. Trust that we have some adults in the room that can actually have a conversation on what we're going to do with this, or what opportunity are we being invited to, and then ask the team to perhaps just throw some conclusions out there or throw some strategies out there to get the dialogue going in a way that we would not have had if we chose to take a more familiar, safer approach to having a team meeting. Remember, the objective here is to create an opportunity where team members can have a greater sense of belonging, meaning, and significance. The other objective is to create an environment where a team begins to expand their intellectual or cognitive aperture of creativity to be more creative in how they're choosing to collaborate and how they're choosing to problem solve together.
Wise words. Brian, thank you. I think that's a good word and good inspiration for all of us as we are starting this new year here and trying to find ways to connect, to grow in our own self-awareness, and connect with those people on our team that we are together growing towards something bigger. So thank you for listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, sharing our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. And if you found value in this podcast episode or any of our other resources, we would appreciate it if you could review us on iTunes, or maybe more importantly, share this with a friend, someone that you think might benefit from going deeper into knowing their strengths, the strengths of their team, or the strengths of their entire organization. I'm Nathan Freeberg.
And I am Brian Schubring.
And on behalf of our entire team, thanks for listening.